record here. All right, we are recording.
All right. Well, thanks for everybody coming out. So tonight we're going to talk about media and how it works and how the right uses it and how we can use it better. So I'm going to start off with giving you guys a question to think about, and then I'm going to let April talk for a minute because she's got a really interesting podcast that you guys all need to listen to recommend. So the question is, aside from like when you're listening to the Reds game at night in your car and you get up the next day and you turn on your engine and you hear Bill Cunningham, how many people in this group actually pay attention to right-wing media?
But say I don't.
So, okay, zero.
I love listening to it.
I can't do it.
I love it.
Okay.
All right, well, we'll come back to this in a few minutes, but I'm going to throw it over to April for a little history and about how we got here.
Thanks. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Thank you. I am on site at a high school lacrosse match. So, and we're ahead 2-0, which is like a great omen for what we're aiming for here, right? So I happened to, in a travel, like a road trip, catch on to this podcast on the media, which is a constant publisher of content with WNYC, and they did a specific series with 5 episodes and some bonus material on what they called and labeled the divided dial. And so they did a really deep dive with lots of references and quotes and observances by folks, lots of history. There's legal issues around things we're all a little bit more familiar with, like the FCC rules and fairness doctrine, and something I had never heard of called the ascertainment policy that stations had to go through when it was seen that they were carrying on their own agendas without regard for being a public service, which they are still legally bound to be. And I highly recommend going through the episodes if you have time, but if you feel you can only do like half of it, the 3rd, 4th, and 5th episodes are the most relevant to today. But the whole thing's interesting. And so what they chronicle is, 2 brothers who start sort of a homespun evangelical and music station. And just from there, we are to today, where 12 out of 15 talk show hosts are ultra conservative. 95% of the people who listen to evangelical church sermon oriented radio also listen to conservative political. So there's a total crossover for them with the market. And once the fairness doctrine and then the ownership of multiple radio stations was let fly by none other than Bill Clinton in like 96 or 7, we have corporate like monopolies on hundreds of stations. I think Clear Channel was quoted as owning 1,200 stations. And so there's lots to unpack, and we could go on for too long, but that's the news and the facts in a nutshell. And what it made Matt and I, without speaking for him, but from our conversations, think about is that, like, there's no way we can get that big, obviously, but how can we help voters have an alternative voice? So that's where I got for a start.
Okay.
So just to go a little into some history and psychology here for a couple of minutes. So this sort of right-wing dominance of media goes back, many, many years in our country. We all remember it. We've all remember like the 90s with the birth of Fox News and the growth of Rush Limbaugh and people like him. And we see the results today. And I think, as we ask ourselves this question about what happened, how did rural America become so red?
Mhm.
I think this is the main culprit. Because if you look at things, this is the message that people get repeatedly, hour by hour. We've all driven out into rural Ohio, or when Jen used to work in Maryland, I would have to drive across Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia to go visit her. There's nothing but right-wing talk radio to listen to on your drive. You stop at a gas station, you stop at PetSmart to buy dog food on your way, they got Fox News on the TV. And, as much as we don't like to think about this as, rational humans as we picture ourselves to be, who controls the media controls the message, because when all you see is one certain viewpoint, yeah, you will eventually start to, that becomes normal. And, especially
And Joey thing, is that gonna be at the wedding?
guys work these things, is they have figured
Susan,
out,
excuse me 1 second, Matt. Susan, your microphone's on. We hear a background.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead, Matt.
so when what they figured out a long time ago was where are the cultural and emotional points that they can hit to get people to act a certain way. And so if you listen, this is why I ask if you listen to right-wing radio or watch right-wing media, because if you watch how they are, you can almost predict what's going to happen in a month's time in our politics, because this is what they start talking about. So they are able to figure out where the anxiety points are for their certain group that they're wanting to talk to, and they constantly hit on those. So as we see, the rural parts of our country become more and more red, and red becomes more and more crazy and fear dominated and devoid of policy and all about hatred, it's because people in the media like Tucker Carlson, like Rush Limbaugh, are pushing on those anxiety points because they can provoke a reaction.
Specific to radio, what was pointed out is Mr. Boyce, James Boyce, who is the owner of Salem Communications, that is a huge mover and factor in the whole scene, is recorded saying to his employees at a conference, it's better to say outlandish things on the radio, because if you tweet it, it's recorded and people can fact check it. But if you speak on the radio, from the listener's standpoint, it's very intimate and people develop this really high level of trust. And we all know that trust is related to voting. So that's like this really dangerous poison in the whole mixture. So they develop this high level of trust of people who are saying very mistaken or purposefully wrong information on a frequent basis. And as he says, essentially you're not going to get caught. It's almost impossible for anyone or any organization or any agency to monitor all of the things that are said on radio in particular. And it's a very intimate experience to have someone in your ear, in your car, in your phone, And so excluding even the TV influence and just not even talking about Fox and not even talking about Tucker Carlson, it's like just the radio part of it, just the audio ownership, and then the followship that happens. It's like, for any of us, one of the things that it made me think was that for any of us to have even 3 quality conversations with someone who has listened to 600 days of their viewpoint, no wonder we can't crack, the surface in terms of trying to shift the narrative, ask different questions, and so forth. So I'm not saying that we should give up on anyone who's listened to AM talk radio for years and years, but I do think that we need to take a step back and think about where our voice is most likely to be effective. We have a whole second generation of people who don't appreciate the fact that their parents listen to those things and buy all those things, and so forth. So, but I also came to have an appreciation and like a forgiveness for people that, of course, if you were inundated with this and you embarked on it because it was like a way for you to have sort of like a mentor, in the void, to bring in this voice into and for guidance, as an adult or as a father or as a mother, to try to be gracious about the fact that like if they don't have the other side of or multiple sides of different arguments, then it makes sense how entrenched they are sometimes with their positions.
So what's our recourse then? I mean, how do we combat this?
Well, I think there's a few things that we think that might work. I think number one is just recognizing that this is a problem. And I would ask everybody who's a Democratic activist, the one thing I hate more than anything else is to hear somebody say Democrats have abandoned rural America, because that is not true. This is why rural America has abandoned the Democrats. And if we have abandoned rural America, it's because we have not used media to reach them like our opponents have. It's not that we've abandoned them policy-wise, because obviously we have not. I mean, even just the Biden administration in and of itself has spent, trillions of dollars trying to help rural Americans. So number one, that's just a self-defeating thing to say. It makes activists feel very, sorry. I gotta stop this, hang on. Why are you doing this to me? Anyway, sorry. So first of all, we need to recognize what's really causing what's going on if we want to know how to counteract it. So in my opinion, the way to beat what's going on in rural America, first and foremost, is not to go back to not to try to go back to the fairness doctrine, not to try to, convince CNN to have more liberal commentators or whatever. We need to do essentially like use the dark arts the way they do, but for the force of good. So I'm going to share my screen for real quick, Dan, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So I want everybody to remember as we think about things like propaganda, this is propaganda. Just like what you hear on AM radio and Fox News is. This is just an image that was put together to influence people to do a certain thing. It is not immoral or in any way like evil to be able to do that. We're political activists. Our whole point is to get people to vote a certain way so we can win elections to make policy, right? That's what we want. So we need to use the tools that are available to us and don't just ignore them because they have some unsavory sort of associations. But in order to really counteract what the right is doing to rural America, it's going to take generations. And I think April is right. We need to go after the kids. The parents are gone already. So I think what we need to do is start using these same tools in psychology to boost our values and get our people to be as dedicated citizens and voters as they have with their people. And you can do that using hope instead of fear.
Okay.
So that's my big speech there. But as a couple of practical recommendations, I would say, one thing that we can all do, and this kind of contradicts a little bit of what I was just saying, but engage with our local and national media providers and platforms. I mean, we already have sort of a friend of the group at the Inquirer in Dan Sewell, but we also have the ability to, when you finally grow tired of watching Fox News at your veterinarian's office, send an email to Spectrum and say, hey, get this off my cable system. Our economic power is a big part of this, And then another thing we can do is when we see someone or read an article or see a video of someone who we want to amplify, we should just amplify it, like we try to do with BND social media. But the hardest and also the most important thing is we need to build our own media infrastructure to counter theirs. That's not easy to do, but somebody has to start it. April's got a link in the invite about what happened last time we tried to do this, and there's some lessons to be learned from that. So I recommend everybody going and reading all the links that we put in the invite if you're interested in any of this stuff.
Yeah, the link about that is the one about Air America, which which was a start for, or somewhere along the career path for Rachel Maddow. And then also Al Franken was one of the featured spokesperson celebrities of that effort. Chuck D from Public Enemy actually had a show, which is like cool. But the unfortunate part is that someone somewhere did not vet the board members and who had the hands on the money. And so before it could even really establish itself, everything tanked. So that then looks like, from outward appearances, it looks like progressive or liberal messaging doesn't pay, but the books don't actually reflect that. It was more like an embezzlement situation. And also in the show, they pointed out the fact that at the time when parity of viewpoints was administered in different time slots, that actually the advertising and the listening numbers for more liberal viewpoints was just as strong as conservative. It's just that essentially once all of the stations started to be vertically aligned, where like I own 100 of you, then it's just messier to try to manage viewpoints from different arenas and possibly lose listeners who only want to hear, you know, one strand. And they had money flowing for the conservative, more fear-based messaging, and it was the higher percentage of the programming. So then ultimately they just went with top to bottom, soup to nuts, you know, midnight to, you know, to back around to midnight again, 24/7, consistent messaging, because it's essentially easier to administrate that.
Sure. Okay, can
Then,
we
for
move
the
to
listener-
questions? Or Matt, did you have to say?
I was gonna say, if you're the listener faced with this situation, it's sort of like if you are fed, you know, hot dogs every day, eventually you grow to love hot dogs.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, Sue Ellen?
So just a reflection on something Matt said. We should go after the kids, which is exactly why there's legislation being proposed to keep us out of the schools on
Mhm.
behalf of the right-wing parents.
Mhm.
But also, I've listened to Matt on this topic a few times. And Matt, when you say build our own, I would like to have some ideas of how that could be done on a scale that we can possibly manage.
You want to take this? Since we were just talking about it?
Yeah, so one of the things that we wondered about was trying to operationalize a pattern whereby maybe weekly we could do some recaps, or do some summaries that bring a digestible amount of information of what is going on and ways to link up with actions or events, in like podcast form or short video form that people could watch and or listen to, and put that out as a means to try to capture people's attention and do that in a, you know, a quick enough format that folks can fit it in their day, but a long enough format, I mean, in my mind, maybe under 20 minutes. Like you're probably, in my mind, you're looking at 12 to 20 minutes probably. That long enough that you can get some detail in, but short enough that people can see the whole thing through. And it could be a really good way to recruit or get attention and build numbers. You know, wouldn't it be great to have enough interest to do more than once a week? But I really think establishing like the Daily Show or like John Oliver's Sunday Night, you know, establishing like a weekly routine might be a really good way for our multi-county Hamilton, Butler, Warren, Claremont County audience to understand that they can plug in real time, but also they could watch it anytime after that just fits in their life.
So the summaries, I mean, it sounds like a great idea, but I'm not quite sure if you're summarizing the negative things that are being done so we can rail against them, or what positive policy issues are making progress, or which, or both, or what?
Probably be both, and you know, because of compare and contrast, and we would use one thing we were talking about was maybe starting this with the BND YouTube channel, because we have the infrastructure already there to do it. So, and we would, have, like, say if we had a really cool guest that week that said something really cool and Dan recorded it, we could pull a clip from that and put it
Mhm.
out, and just be able to sort of grow our reach a little bit in our community. And then this would be the basis for which we could start, growing larger.
Who are the resource people that you could see contributing to such a thing?
Anybody that wants to contribute is more than welcome to.
Well, I know, but I mean to get it on the YouTube channel, get it videoed, make it.
Right.
Those,
From a
those,
Yeah,
like from a logistical perspective, Sue Ellen, like,
yes, thank you.
yeah.
probably me in April, maybe with some help from Dan. So, but once you get the stuff videoed, getting it up onto the YouTube channel is like a couple clicks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
but-
think that also we can connect. I mean, it could be a really good way. So like Rachel Coyle has decided to get her message out about kind of like the highest topic on her platform by making TikTok videos. So we could absolutely just feature that. We do want to connect people to the reasoning and the knowledge of Heather Cox Richardson. We could not feature her writing, but we could feature a quote from it and direct people to that. So essentially, I think that you could view it almost as like the front page of a newspaper, but audio. And it's just like, okay, what is this? What's the 30 seconds on that? And not a single week is ever going to be perfect. That's not the point. The point is to try to generate dialogue and try to get people talking with each other about these issues, knowing more and knowing what to ask and how to follow up and how to encourage a spirit of curiosity instead of, being belabored with the stress of it. I think it's really important that when the voting measure that ultimately went through, that got rid of the couple days of voting, like the Monday before fall voting and whatever, the first time that thing came up, they got like 1,200 calls at the State House and they shelved it because of the public response. And I think people in Ohio need to understand how much power they can have if there is a lot of voicing of concern across 2 or 3 days. Now, we've suffered a lot with fair districts, for instance, where many, many people spoke up and it didn't get us where it should. But still, I think it conveying to people, 70% of you agree on this. All of these people agree, like reminding people that the thing that they're thinking and feeling is actually the norm. It's actually like the state is actually purple and it's actually the norm to expect these things. I think it's about trying to just create that message like you do in a high school, since I'm sitting at a high school. Like, what are we about? Who are we? What do we stand for? And helping people connect like the little dots back to those principles. We're like almost at half time and it's 10-0. Woo-hoo.
Okay.
That's crazy.
Anybody else have any questions?
I
Round me
hope
up the
they are
score.
winning.
We are winning. We are winning. We are winning.
Okay.
It's Turpin versus Little Miami, and we are handily winning. Anyway, so sorry, but I don't know. What do people have thoughts about what things would make something like that more or less accessible, more or less popular, more or less desired? I don't know. Anybody?
I know myself, I'd have to give it some thought. I would certainly support it, but I'd have to give it some thought about how to make it popular or something. I don't know.
If I may, having watched Jon Stewart's podcast many times, personally, I find his use of humor extremely helpful. And I'm wondering if there's some way, we could incorporate humor, satire in that.
Mhm.
It's a really good idea.
I mean, I'd love to think that Matt and I could be as funny as they are on Saturday Night Live News Desk. We might not be able to, but maybe we could work out like one funny thing every time.
There we go. Open and close with a joke or something.
Works for sermons, right? For preachers. That's what they always do.
Yeah.
If we don't take anything else away from this discussion, the one thing I would like us to all remember is just sort of what April was getting at. We have, we shouldn't consider ourselves to be consumers. We should consider ourselves to be creators. We have the power to do this. Other people have done it. Our political opponents do it on the regular. We can do it too. And I think if us and other groups like us throughout the country start doing this kind of stuff, and you can already see people doing it if you spend any time online in sort of lefty circles, and it makes a difference because it makes people feel that they have power. And when you feel like you have power, you don't give up. And when you don't give up, the other side doesn't win all the time. So that's the first and most important message to give to people is you have power to do something. Because the message that they're getting from their Rush Limbaugh clones and Tucker Carlson and the Republican Party is that you don't have any power, only we can protect you. And that's an important message to counteract.
Mhm. Well,
I just want to say one thing. I don't know who else clicked on any of the links to the stuff that Matt and April telegraphed, but I just clicked on the one that April said, this is the one, if you're going to do one. Of course, it was a mile long, but I flipped down through it to see the progression and the end of it. And the thing that struck me the most was right up at the top in the fact that it was written in 2005.
Yep. I thought someone would pick up on that.
So it was, I mean, we're not even, they started a long time ago.
Mhm.
And it's pretty
and
amazing.
they started building 20 years before that.
Oh, easily.
Yeah. Or 30.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yes. Salem Communications, I want to say, Matt, maybe memory's better than me, but has been around for something like 60 years. I mean, the brother built the first transmitter out stuff in his barn and attached it to a windmill at the top of the house so that they could have a signal because they didn't have electricity. So we're literally going back to, from scratch. But the issue is that these people who started in it had a very, very narrow worldview. And that's how we got things like Focus on the Family, with Mr. Dobson, if you're familiar with him. And it's, women should be at home and sort of barefoot and pregnant, but definitely not working outside of the house. And it's very anti-LGBTQIA. So it's, it's not, it could be an all-American story of ingenuity, but except that they have this exclusionary focus in their business model where only a tiny percentage of the people belong. And so I think that's the piece. It's like, even though enterprises on a progressive side might be much smaller in focus and resource. If what we're saying is everyone belongs, then in a way we're having a bigger footprint, even if we start out small.
Yeah. Okay, I put my email address here in the chat. If people want to be thinking about this, how can we somehow develop our media? What would it look like? What would the content look like? How would it be presented? Any general ideas about it, and I'll put it together into a document that can be shared with everybody coming up. And if you don't think of it right away, that's fine. We can add stuff later on. But certainly give it some concern.
I noticed Dan Zavon turned off his mute. I wonder if he had a remark to make before we finish.
No, I took a phone call and came back in and forgot to mute myself.
Okay. Good. Right.
Julie has her hand up.
Go ahead, Julie.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I can't see if Dan Lancelota is with us tonight. No, he's not.
His daughter was ill.
Yeah, I feel very strongly like we need to take the lead on this from people his age, because I don't understand why all the sons and daughters of my friends don't listen to NPR. I don't get it. And April, you look young, but I think we really need to get behind the curve and get young people who are political activists to be the leaders in this project that we're in. I agree, it's very important, but we aren't the ones to know what to do, I don't think.
I have to agree with you to a certain extent about Dan L, but I think when we talk about getting somebody else to do the work, to take the lead, in a lot of ways that kind of washes our hands of the responsibility. I think a lot of people are doing this on their own anyway. We don't have to be the only ones. We can support them. They can support us, but I don't think that should interfere with us doing what we think is right. Because one of the things about the progressive movement in the Democratic Party that I like is it is a multi-generational, pluralistic, multiracial, multi-viewpoint movement. And I don't think we benefit from keeping our own voices quiet to let other people talk any more than we benefit from shutting up those other people. I think we all should have the will and the power to talk. And we need to start thinking of ourselves as not just activists, but as leaders, because really that's what an activist is. So I think not to like push back too hard against you, Julie, because you're right in a lot of ways, but I think there's room for all voices in this conversation.
I do agree though that like there are some student organizations, like I know a couple people that are active on Xavier campus, for instance, where it's like it would be a really smart alignment to say, hey, what's going on in, for your issues, what are you guys noticing, and try to connect the generations. One thing we know that absolutely happens on AM conservative talk radio is that there is this motto of, division, and there is this theme of scapegoating. And so if we are able to model the opposite of that, so my mantra with my daughter, and we developed that spontaneously in our soccer fall season, was when the team was having some friction between players and things. It was like, you guys have to get back to, I like you. I'm glad you're here and I want good things for you, for each other. And if we think about Rush Limbaugh and we think about other figures on talk radio, they literally led every single day with the opposite. Here are people I hate. I'm really glad we're not including them and I want bad things for them. Like that is their whole existence.
Yeah.
And obviously, Matt and I talked about the fact that tension and friction is necessary sometimes to make things interesting, right? So we can't just get on and do like kumbaya stuff. That's not the point. But life is bringing us plenty of friction. Life is bringing us legislators that don't do what we send them to the state house to do, or DC to do. And so we already have things, for as long as Mitch McConnell's alive, we have somebody to say what the heck about. But we don't have to vilify the person, but rather their actions. But I do think that reaching across generations is a fantastic way to broaden the reach. And we can learn so much from them because they're so much better at technology than we are.
Just need to remember to reach across and not be like, okay, you guys do it.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Right. But I hear you. I think it's a very good.
Okay, Ruth, did you have something?
You've been saying everything that I was thinking, which is that idea from Gandhi, I believe, become the change in your own life. And then when we're older, we are wiser. It happens for most of us with age, if we grow up, or at least gradually mature, whatever that is. And so when we do that, we are an example to the young people. We are supporting the young people. We are loving the young people. And we are also very positive about all the things that we do have to offer, like the inclusivity that you were talking about. And then also, I think, focus on what we can do and know that maybe we will not reap the benefits totally of, we will plant the tree or maybe only the seed, but the tree will grow and the next generations will reap some of the benefits. That's okay too. But okay. That's you all were saying everything I was thinking. So thank you.
Okay. All right. We better move on if we're going to get to the rest of our agenda for tonight. And so I'll say thank you to April and Matt.
And thank you. Yes, forgot to say
very good. Give us a lot to think about, certainly. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording for now.